Mr. Speaker. I'd first like to thank all council for your comments. There's some good, bad, and ugly comments on this capital budget. The question has come up, is this, does this budget answer every concern that we have here in the city of Winnipeg? And the answer is quite simply no. But it is a step in the right direction in terms of how we're spending our money. As mentioned, I'm going to do a brief review of the budget and then try to address some questions that some councillors raised. But this budget really does focus on the public safety. You've got the downtown police station. You've got a number of fire stations that are going to be built, whether it be this year or over the next number of years. You've got substantial more investments in roads, regional and local streets. I know that was something that Councillor White had mentioned last year, and this is within the document. 30% more we're spending on regional and local streets for this. We're doing a gravel back lane program that's there. They're very much needed. We're also doing things like green space, open green space, Assiniboine Park. We're doing local and regional parks as well, a part of this, and getting caught up on a lot of the infrastructure that is there. Turning to some of the questions, so the infrastructure deficit. This is something that I think we've been fighting for a long period of time. I was reading over the weekend the editorial by one of the media outlets, and it talked about the infrastructure deficit and what the province should do in terms of how we fund this. But what was striking to me about the article was that they talked about this in 1976. This has been an issue that the cities have been facing for 35 years. Okay? Is there any easy answers? No, absolutely not. But it's not something that just rests with this council. We've been struggling with this for numerous years, and we think that there's a way forward. We think there's some internal solutions, whether the P3s. Some people like the P3s, some people don't. At the end of the day, you're getting projects online a lot earlier. You're getting less risk, in my opinion, but you're getting projects that might not have fit into the capital budget a lot earlier, from my opinion. We're doing things like asset management, which we think is spending money more in a more of a smart way. There's debt strategy, which is going to be coming forward, I think, that addresses us, that allows us to look at these items. But there's also things that the provincial government needs to do, and we need to continue to lobby them to address some of these issues that are there. Borrowing money to pay for infrastructure. Well, it's one item that's been talked a lot. I can tell you there's a limited amount of money we can do. If I wanted to do everything in the world, sure, throw it in the capital budget. The reality is we cannot afford to spend money on every single nook and cranny, every single initiative that's out there. Would we love to do it? Absolutely. But we need to stay within the realm of what we can deliver to our services. There's a debt strategy that's coming forward, what's going to outline of how we can use that cash to capital component, how we can use debt financing to make sure it doesn't impact our credit rating. And going back to the time of the 70s, when they're spending money like no one's, like a drunken sailor in terms of infrastructure that's there, I don't think is a recipe for something that people want to get involved in. I can tell you there's also some talk in terms of using some of the cash to capital there. Well, the cash to the capital, if we use every single cent of that to fund just the basic infrastructure, there's going to be nothing new for any special projects come up. I can tell you whether it's this provincial government gets reelected or there's another one, what always happens is there's initiatives that come forward. There's the initiative of the day, whether it's Centerport 2-3 years ago, whether it's other items like this, there's always going to be an initiative, and we need some flexibility within our dollar system to help fund this. Now, the cash to capital thing, I think, is something that's there. Another issue that was brought up by my good friend Councillor Gerbasi was input on the capital budget. Well, I can tell you that for the first time in the city's history, we've had pre-budget consultation sessions. Were some of them attended well? Were some not? Fair point. But the reality is, we put them there for the first time in the city's history for the capital. We did the operating last year, which I think is a very important part. As I noted, I know Councillor Gerbasi, from you, Mr. Speaker, didn't attend any of those events. And also the EPC sessions where people have a say. If you've got some concerns with the item, come up and bring up some ideas to do it. Don't just say somehow we're not in a consultation session. Also, I think sometimes there's opposition councillors. We could say that we give you a month to debate this thing, and they'll say, well, why didn't you give 5 weeks? We did 2 public consultation sessions. Why didn't you do 3? So, it never ends here. And I think we're making some strides to make it more of a transparent process. Another item that was talked about is in terms of AT funding. And as Councillor Brawadi had mentioned, we're not just spending the money on the existing budget lines that's there, but we're spending anywhere between $3 to $5 million for an overpass For the Chief Peguis Trail, you're spending anywhere between $10 and $15 million for the Disraeli for separate AT funding. So I think the AT funding is there. Councillor Gerbasi, and I don't think Councillor Eadie had mentioned this, but in terms of accessibility funding, well, we're coming in at the same levels we have for a number of years. But that doesn't necessarily mean, same thing with active transportation, doesn't mean we're not spending money that's there. You spent over $1 million making City Hall the most accessible City Hall, I would argue, in the nation. That was a part of that. That's funding that's there. Any bridge, any sidewalk, any initiatives that that come forward, the accessibility is built into it. It might not be directly within the budget. We are spending X amount of dollars. There's also some talk about intercity funding that was there. You know, Councillor Steves outlined it. I won't talk again about it, but there's tons of projects that are going on downtown. You've got the Avenue building, you've got streetscaping, you've got everything that's happening, the waterfront drive, you've got parking initiatives, you've got a number of things that are going to downtown. To say that we're not spending adequate amounts of money is just wrong. You can't just spend money in the downtown. There's needs in the suburbs, St. James, St. Vital, you name it, all these other places. You know, I'm not sure why there should always be just a focus on the downtown, because the city is a very wide area that we need to look into. Our Winnipeg is something that was kind of touched upon that's there. You know, there's a lot of councillors here that like to come up and say, we should do this, we should do that in our Winnipeg. What drives me completely crazy on this is we all endorse our Winnipeg, we talk about these, and then you have development opportunities that come up in our city, and they get turned down at the committee level. Why do they get turned down? They meet the our Winnipeg criteria for it. So, you know, if you're going to talk about our Winnipeg, you got to, you know, talk the talk and walk the walk. And you got to make decisions that make sense for the community, not just for political reasons. There's also some talk in terms of the cut from the budget last year. Well, last year we had the biggest stimulus projects in the city's history, right? Including federal government, provincial government monies that's there. So to compare this year versus last year, I think is not a fair comparison. And if you factor all the stimulus dollars that was a part of it, this city is actually spending more on infrastructure spending than we did last year. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I hope I've addressed some of the questions and concerns, and I encourage all councillors to support the budget. I think it's a first good step in the right direction as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.